Once upon a time, in a small village nestled in the countryside, there lived a carpenter named John. He was known throughout the village for his exceptional woodworking skills and was highly respected by his peers. However, despite his talent and experience, John had a habit of making excuses whenever he made a mistake or produced subpar work. One day, John was commissioned to build a wooden table for a wealthy merchant in the neighboring town. He was excited to take on the project and worked tirelessly for days to craft the perfect table. However, when he presented the finished product to the merchant, he was disappointed to see that there were several noticeable flaws and imperfections. The merchant was not pleased and demanded that John fix the table or he would not pay him. John was taken aback by the request and quickly became defensive, insisting that the tools he had used were old and faulty, and that was the reason for the imperfections. The merchant, however, was not convinced by John's excuses and refused to pay him until the table was fixed. Feeling frustrated and embarrassed, John returned to his workshop and examined his tools closely. To his surprise, he realized that his tools were in good condition and that the real problem was his own lack of attention to detail and his tendency to rush through his work. He realized that he had been blaming his tools for his own mistakes and lack of skill. Determined to make things right, John spent the next several days working diligently on the table, taking extra care to ensure that every detail was perfect. When he finally presented the finished product to the merchant, it was flawless and exceeded all expectations. The merchant was impressed and paid John in full, thanking him for his hard work and dedication. From that day forward, John realized that he could no longer blame his tools or anyone else for his own mistakes. He knew that he had to take responsibility for his work and strive to improve his skills every day. He became more patient and detail-oriented, and his workmanship improved drastically. Over time, he gained a reputation as one of the finest carpenters in the region, and his clients were always satisfied with his work. The lesson that John learned was simple but profound. A bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes responsibility for his own mistakes and strives to improve his skills. From that day forward, he made sure to approach every project with care and attention to detail, and he never made excuses for his own shortcomings. His success was a testament to the power of hard work, dedication, and personal responsibility. As time passed, John's reputation as a skilled carpenter continued to grow, and he received more and more requests for his services. His newfound attention to detail and focus on personal responsibility paid off, and he quickly became the go-to carpenter for the entire village and the surrounding areas. One day, a young apprentice named David approached John and asked to work with him as an apprentice. David was eager to learn from John and hoped to become a skilled carpenter himself someday. John agreed to take David under his wing and teach him everything he knew about woodworking. David was a quick learner, and John was impressed with his dedication and enthusiasm. However, he soon noticed that David had a tendency to make excuses whenever he made a mistake or produced subpar work. John recognized this behavior as the same bad habit that he had once struggled with and knew that he had to help David overcome it. To teach David the importance of personal responsibility, John devised a plan. He asked David to build a wooden stool on his own and bring it to him for inspection. David worked hard on the stool and was pleased with the result. However, when he brought it to John for inspection, John immediately noticed several imperfections. David was disappointed but quickly started making excuses, blaming the quality of the wood or the tools he had used for the imperfections. John listened patiently but then reminded David of the lesson he had learned himself many years before: a bad workman blames his tools. John then sat down with David and helped him examine the stool carefully, pointing out the areas where he could improve and offering tips for avoiding similar mistakes in the future. David realized that he had been making excuses for his own shortcomings, just as John had done before him, and he felt embarrassed. However, John reassured David that this was a valuable lesson and that he was not alone in his struggle to take personal responsibility. He encouraged David to keep practicing and to focus on improving his skills every day. In the end, David took John's advice to heart and worked hard to improve his woodworking skills. He became a skilled carpenter in his own right and passed on the lessons he had learned from John to his own apprentices. The story of John and David serves as a reminder of the importance of personal responsibility and the danger of making excuses. A bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes responsibility for his own mistakes and works hard to improve his skills. In the end, it is this dedication and focus on personal growth that leads to success, both in carpentry and in life. As John and David continued to work together, John shared with David some of the mistakes he had made in his early days as a carpenter. He told David about the times he had blamed his tools for his mistakes, and how he had realized that the problem was not with the tools, but with his own lack of skill and attention to detail. John also shared with David the importance of perseverance and hard work. He reminded David that woodworking was a craft that required patience, practice, and dedication. He encouraged David to take his time and focus on every detail of his work, and to always strive to improve his skills. David took John's advice to heart and continued to work hard, dedicating himself to learning everything he could from John. Over time, he became a skilled carpenter in his own right, and his work was highly sought after throughout the region. One day, John fell ill and was unable to work. David stepped up and took over John's business, working tirelessly to fulfill John's outstanding orders and maintain his reputation for quality workmanship. Although John was unable to work for several months, his business continued to thrive, thanks to David's dedication and hard work. When John recovered, he was pleased to see that his business had not suffered during his absence. He was proud of David's work and knew that he had chosen the right apprentice to carry on his legacy. Together, John and David continued to work side by side, building furniture that was both beautiful and functional. They took pride in their work and in the knowledge that they were passing on their craft to the next generation. In the end, the story of John and David serves as a testament to the importance of hard work, dedication, and personal responsibility. A bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes responsibility for his own mistakes and strives to improve his skills every day. And with perseverance and dedication, even the most challenging obstacles can be overcome. As the years went by, John and David became known throughout the region as the best carpenters in the area. Their work was highly sought after, and people would travel for miles to commission a piece of furniture from them. However, despite their success, John and David remained humble and dedicated to their craft. They never stopped learning and improving, and they always put their customers' needs first. One day, a wealthy merchant approached John and asked him to build a set of ornate bookcases for his home. The merchant was very particular about the design and demanded that the bookcases be completed within a very tight deadline. John knew the project would be a challenge, but he agreed to take it on. He enlisted David's help, and together they set to work on the bookcases. However, as they began the project, they discovered that the wood they had purchased was not of the quality they had hoped for. The grain was uneven, and the boards were prone to splitting. David was quick to blame the poor quality of the wood for any mistakes they made, but John reminded him of the lesson he had learned so many years ago: a bad workman blames his tools. John and David worked tirelessly on the bookcases, carefully selecting each piece of wood and taking great care to ensure that every detail was perfect. They put in long hours, often working late into the night, and sacrificed their own personal time to meet the tight deadline. In the end, the bookcases were completed on time, and the merchant was thrilled with the result. He praised John and David for their skill and dedication, and word of their work spread even further throughout the region. The experience taught David an important lesson about personal responsibility and dedication. He realized that it was not enough to blame external factors for any mistakes or shortcomings. Instead, he needed to take ownership of his work and strive to do his best, no matter what obstacles he faced. As John and David continued to work together, they became known not just for their skill but also for their dedication and work ethic. They inspired others to take pride in their work and to always strive for excellence. In the end, The story of John and David serves as a reminder that success is not just about talent or luck, but also about hard work, dedication, and personal responsibility. A bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes ownership of his work and always strives to improve. And it is this dedication to excellence that sets the best craftsmen apart from the rest. Years passed, and John grew old. He decided to retire and pass on his business to David, who had become a skilled carpenter in his own right. John knew that David had the same dedication to their craft that he did, and he was confident that his business would be in good hands. David continued to build beautiful furniture and uphold John's legacy of excellence. However, he faced new challenges as he took on the responsibilities of running the business. He had to manage a team of carpenters, handle customer orders and complaints, and ensure that the business remained profitable. One day, David received a complaint from a customer who had ordered a custom-built table. The customer claimed that the table was uneven and unstable, and demanded that David fix it immediately. David was taken aback by the complaint. He knew that his team had built the table to the best of their abilities, and he couldn't understand how it could be unstable. However, he agreed to take a look at the table and try to fix it. As he examined the table, David realized that the problem was not with the table itself, but with the customer's floors. They were uneven, and the table had been placed on a slight slope. David explained the situation to the customer and offered to adjust the legs of the table to make it stable on their floors. The customer was impressed with David's professionalism and dedication to solving the problem, and he apologized for blaming the table instead of examining the situation more closely. The incident reminded David of the lesson he had learned years ago from John. A bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes responsibility for his work and looks for solutions to problems. David continued to run the business successfully, always striving to provide the best possible service to his customers. He took pride in his work and never stopped learning and improving his skills. In the end, the story of John and David is a testament to the power of hard work, dedication, and personal responsibility. It reminds us that success is not just about talent or luck, but about the willingness to take ownership of our work and strive for excellence every day. As David continued to run the business, he faced many more challenges along the way. Some of his carpenters would occasionally make mistakes, causing delays and rework. When David confronted them about it, some would try to blame the tools or the materials they were working with, just like David had done years ago. However, David always remembered the lesson he learned from John, and he would remind his carpenters that a bad workman blames his tools. He encouraged them to take ownership of their work and look for ways to improve their skills and techniques. David also faced challenges from competitors who tried to undercut his prices or copy his designs. But he refused to compromise on the quality of his work or the values he had learned from John. He believed that his customers deserved the best, and he was willing to work hard to provide it. Over time, David's reputation as a skilled and reliable carpenter grew, and his business thrived. He expanded his offerings to include custom-built kitchens, cabinets, and other high-end furniture pieces. His customers were always satisfied, and many became repeat customers or referred their friends and family to him. As David approached retirement age, he knew that it was time to pass on his legacy to a new generation. He had trained many young carpenters over the years, and he chose one of his most promising protégés to take over the business. Before he retired, David took the young carpenter aside and shared the lesson he had learned from John so many years ago. He reminded him that a bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes ownership of his work and always strives to improve. The young carpenter listened intently, grateful for the wisdom and guidance of his mentor. He promised to uphold the values and standards that David had set for the business and to always strive for excellence in his work. As David retired and looked back on his long and successful career, he felt proud of the legacy he had built. He knew that he had followed in John's footsteps, upholding the values of hard work, dedication, and personal responsibility that had been passed down to him. In the end, The story of John and David serves as a reminder that success is not just about talent or luck, but also about the values and principles that we live by. A bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes ownership of his work and always strives to improve. And it is this dedication to excellence that sets the best craftsmen apart from the rest. John was a skilled carpenter who had built his reputation on the quality of his work. He was known throughout the town for his attention to detail and his commitment to using the best materials and tools available. One day, John took on a new apprentice named David. David was eager to learn from John and become a skilled carpenter like him. John was happy to teach David everything he knew and to share his passion for their craft. As David worked alongside John, he quickly learned that there was much more to carpentry than simply using the best tools and materials. He saw firsthand how John took pride in his work, always striving for perfection and never cutting corners. However, David also noticed that when things didn't go as planned, John would sometimes blame his tools or materials. For example, if a piece of wood was slightly warped, John would complain that the wood was no good and blame it for any flaws in the finished product. David began to wonder if blaming the tools or materials was a sign of weakness or an excuse for poor workmanship. He couldn't help but feel that John's approach was flawed, as it seemed to absolve him of any responsibility for mistakes. One day, David was working on a project of his own when he encountered a problem. He had measured the wood incorrectly, and the pieces didn't fit together as the why should have. Frustrated, he started to blame his tools, claiming that they weren't precise enough or that they were the wrong size. However, John overheard David's complaints and immediately set him straight. He reminded David that a bad workman blames his tools and that a true craftsman takes responsibility for his work, no matter what the circumstances. John went on to explain that blaming the tools or materials was a sign of weakness, and that it was important to take ownership of one's mistakes and look for ways to improve. He encouraged David to learn from his mistake, to measure more carefully in the future, and to never again blame his tools for any errors. David took John's words to heart and vowed to always take responsibility for his work, no matter what challenges he faced. He continued to learn from John, developing his skills and honing his craft. Years passed, and David became an accomplished carpenter in his own right. He built a successful business of his own, following in John's footsteps and always striving for excellence in his work. However, David never forgot the lesson he had learned from John all those years ago. He knew that a bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes ownership of his work and always looks for ways to improve. And it was this dedication to personal responsibility and continuous improvement that set David apart from the rest, making him a true master of his craft. As David continued to run his business, he encountered many challenges and obstacles along the way. Some of his employees would occasionally make mistakes, causing delays and rework. When David confronted them about it, some would try to blame the tools or the materials they were working with, just like John had done years ago. However, David always remembered the lesson he learned from John, and he would remind his employees that a bad workman blames his tools. He encouraged them to take ownership of their work and look for ways to improve their skills and techniques. David also faced challenges from competitors who tried to undercut his prices or copy his designs. But he refused to compromise on the quality of his work or the values he had learned from John. He believed that his customers deserved the best, and he was willing to work hard to provide it. Over time, David's reputation as a skilled and reliable carpenter grew, and his business thrived. He expanded his offerings to include custom-built kitchens, cabinets, and other high-end furniture pieces. His customers were always satisfied, and many became repeat customers or referred their friends and family to him. As David approached retirement age, he knew that it was time to pass on his legacy to a new generation. He had trained many young carpenters over the years, and he chose one of his most promising protégés to take over the business. Before he retired, David took the young carpenter aside and shared the lesson he had learned from John so many years ago. He reminded him that a bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes ownership of his work and always strives to improve." The young carpenter listened intently, grateful for the wisdom and guidance of his mentor. He promised to uphold the values and standards that David had set for the business and to always strive for excellence in his work. As David retired and looked back on his long and successful career, he felt proud of the legacy he had built. He knew that he had followed in John's footsteps, upholding the values of hard work, dedication, and personal responsibility that had been passed down to him. In the end, the story of John and David serves as a reminder that success is not just about talent or luck, but also about the values and principles that we live by. A bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes ownership of his work and always strives to improve. And it is this dedication to excellence that sets the best craftsmen apart from the rest. As the years went by, David's business continued to grow and thrive. He was able to hire more employees and expand his offerings to include even more custom furniture and cabinetry. His reputation for quality workmanship and exceptional customer service grew throughout the community, and he became known as one of the best carpenters in the area. David never forgot the lesson he learned from John all those years ago. Whenever something went wrong or a mistake was made, he never blamed his tools or materials. Instead, he would take the time to figure out what went wrong and how he could do better next time. Over time, David began to notice that some of his competitors weren't as committed to quality workmanship as he was. They would cut corners and use cheaper materials to save money and maximize profits. Some would even blame their tools or materials when something went wrong, just as John had warned. David knew that this wasn't the kind of business he wanted to run. He believed that his customers deserved the very best, and he was committed to delivering it every time. He continued to invest in high-quality materials and tools, and he hired only the best craftsmen to work for him. As his business grew, David became more involved in the community. He volunteered his time and resources to local charities and organizations, and he became known as a leader and a role model in the community. One day, David received a call from the local high school. They were looking for a carpenter to teach a woodworking class, and they had heard about his reputation for excellence. David jumped at the chance to share his knowledge and skills with the next generation of carpenters. David began teaching the class, and he quickly realized that many of his students were just like he had been when he first started out. They were eager to learn and passionate about the craft, but they didn't always know how to take ownership of their work or overcome challenges when things went wrong. David shared the lessons he had learned from John all those years ago. He reminded them that a bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes ownership of his work and always strives to improve. He encouraged them to never give up, even when things got tough, and to always be willing to learn from their mistakes. As the class progressed, David was amazed at the progress his students were making. They were taking ownership of their work and showing a level of dedication and commitment that he had rarely seen before. He knew that he had made a difference in their lives, just as John had made a difference in his. In the end, the story of John and David serves as a reminder that success isn't just about talent or hard work. It's about the values and principles that we live by, and the commitment we make to always do our best, no matter what challenges we face. A bad workman blames his tools, but a good workman takes ownership of his work and always strives to improve. And it is this commitment to excellence that sets the best craftsmen apart from the rest.